Another royal son, Hustapus, was out of the country, safe for the moment. That left Artaxerxes, a mere teenager at the time. Artabanus left him alive, figuring he could rule through him as regent. Then, 7 months later, he changed his mind and tried to kill him too. But as luck would have it, the lad killed Artabanus instead. Hustapus showed up shortly thereafter and tried to claim the throne, so Artaxerxes killed him as well. These guys needed a constitution in the worst way. Anyway, all of this maneuvering took the better part of a year. Thus Arti apparently wasn't able to assume the throne until 464. That would make the starting date of Daniel's prophecy the 1st of Nisan, 444 BC. From this date we must count
7 weeks and 62 weeks.
That is, there would be 49 years until Jerusalem's street and wall were built.
Even in troublesome times.
The books of Ezra and Nehemiah relate just how troublesome they were. And another 434 years, or 483 years total,
until Messiah, the Prince.
483 years times 360 days, the length of the Hebrew prophetic year, comes out to 173,880 days, or 476 solar years and 25 days inclusive. That is, to the 10th of Nisan, or March 28th, AD 33. And on March 28th, AD 33, if my calculations are correct, Yahshua of Nazareth rode into Jerusalem on a donkey amid the adulation of a teeming throng of Jewish worshippers in town for the Passover holiday. Messiah the Prince had come. God's Passover lamb had entered the household of Israel, just as the Torah required. 4 days later, on April 1st, or the 14th of Nisan, Passover, that is, immediately
after the 62 weeks,
Yahshua was
cut off, but not for himself.
A polite euphemism for being scourged within an inch of his life with a Roman flagrum, crowned with a wreath of cruel thorns, mocked, spat upon, crucified, and placed cold and dead into a borrowed tomb, though he was guilty of no crime. David had seen it.
Those who hate me without a cause are more than the hairs of my head. They are mighty who would destroy me, being my enemies wrongfully. Though I have stolen nothing, I still must restore it. Psalm 69:4.
Confirmation of the AD 33 date comes from several sources. First, the 14th of Nisan fell on a Friday in 33 on the Julian calendar, but on a Monday in 32, a poor fit for the Gospel's chronology. Second, there was a lunar eclipse on the afternoon of the 14th of Nisan 33, the very time of Christ's crucifixion. All 3 synoptic gospel writers recorded it.
Now from the 6th hour,
noon,
to the 9th hour, there was a darkness over the land. Matthew 27:45.
An eclipse, of course, can't account for 3 hours of darkness, but it's a significant sign nevertheless. And then there's the matter of the letter written by Pontius Pilate, explaining to the emperor why he crucified Yahshua of Nazareth. The letter, now in the British Museum, is dated, quote, the 5th of the calends of April, unquote. Calends referring to the beginning of a month. If the crucifixion took place in AD 33, the letter was written on the first Tuesday after the event. But in 32, the 14th of Nisan fell on April 12th, 7 days after the procurator wrote his letter. Therefore, it seems reasonable to conclude that Daniel's first 69 weeks fell between 444 BC and AD 33. There is a gap between the 69th and 70th weeks. We know this because several events are predicted to occur between the 2 periods. First is the cutting off of the Messiah, and the passage continues.
And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and sanctuary. The end of it shall be with,
or like,
a flood. and till the end of the war, desolations are determined. Daniel 9:26.
This must have knocked the wind out of Daniel's sails. He had been praying that the city and sanctuary would be restored. God, through Gabriel, is stating here that they will be, only to be destroyed a second time. Remember, this is a continuation of the thought,
Messiah will be cut off.
There's a causal relationship between the two events. It's not hard to figure out who the people who would trash Jerusalem are, of course. The Romans under Titus pummeled the rebellious province of Judea starting in AD 67, capping their achievement with the sacking of the besieged and starving Jerusalem in 70. As Joshua had predicted, not one stone of the temple was left upon another. The Roman soldiers completely dismantled the magnificent building looking for gold.
The prince who is to come
is a character who will have a major role in events still future. We'll talk about him later. The phrase,
till the end of the war, desolations are determined,
brings tears to my eyes. You see, the war should have ended with the fall of Jerusalem. There were no longer any meaningful targets in all of Judea. But 967 die-hard zealot rebels holed up in Herod's Dead Sea retreat, Masada, and the Romans under Flavius Silva, who refused on principle to let it go, spent 7 months and hundreds of thousands of man-hours of Jewish slave labor building an earthen ramp through a gorge so that they could storm the virtually impregnable fortress. But on the 15th of Nisan, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, in 73 A.D., the night before the Romans finally breached the wall, all of the Jewish defenders, all except one woman who lived to tell the tale, committed mass suicide rather than submitting to the Romans. They destroyed everything of intrinsic value, leaving the Romans nothing to loot, but left untouched enough food and water to hold out for several years, their mute testimony to the Romans of what the zealot leader, Eleazar ben Yair, had written, quote, "It will bear witness when we are dead to the fact that we perished not through want, but because, as we resolved at the beginning, we chose death rather than slavery." Unquote. The Jewish defenders were passionate and courageous, but the prophecy had been written.
Till the end of the war, desolations are determined.
69 of the 70 weeks are thus accounted for. There is but one 7-year era left in which to complete the amazing list of events in Daniel's prophecy. The revelation goes on to describe events within this 70th week, and we will address them in due course, for they are still future. The gap between the 69th and 70th weeks is outside the time period Gabriel told Daniel had been
determined for your people and your set-apart city.
In other words, God is not specifically dealing with the nation of Israel or with Jerusalem at this time, and has not been doing so for the past 2 millennia or so. He hasn't forgotten about them, but this is not their time. Their time will begin again when this final week commences. If you'll recall from chapter 3, the Talmud predicted that the third 2,000-year slice of human history, this same chunk of time we've been discussing, this gap between the 69th and 70th week, would be the age of the Messiah. And indeed, the called-out assembly of those who recognize Yahshua as their Messiah have been God's focus during this time. But the whole Daniel 9 prophecy is about this same personality, the Messiah, the Prince. The Jews by Daniel's time had well-defined expectations of who this Messiah, the Anointed One, would be. When John the Baptist was asked,
"Are you the prophet?" John 1:21.
His questioners were referring to a prophecy from Moses.
Yahweh your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear, according to all you desired of Yahweh your God in Horeb, in the day of the assembly, saying, Let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my God, nor let me see this great fire any more, lest I die. And Yahweh said to me, What they have spoken is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. Deuteronomy 18:15 through 19.
Experiencing the glory of Yahweh had been too much for the elders of Israel. God knew that only a man could communicate with them in terms they could comprehend. Here he predicts that this man would be a Jew, a prophet like Moses, who would speak the words of Yahweh. The prophet would turn out to be the same person as the Messiah, though this was still being debated in Yahshua's day. John was not the prophet, and he said so. Yahshua was. The Jews no doubt missed it, but when Moses asked God to choose a man to lead Israel after him, his answer was prophetic of the Messiah.
Then Moses spoke to Yahweh, saying, Let Yahweh, the God of the spirit of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, who may go out before them and go in before them, who may lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of Yahweh may not be like sheep which have no shepherd. And Yahweh said to Moses, Take Yahshua, the son of Nun, with you, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Numbers 27:15 through 18.
Many people know that Joshua is the same name as Yahshua, the anglicized Jesus. What's interesting here is Joshua's father's name. Nun means perpetual. In effect, the Spirit-filled man to be set over the congregation, who would be their leader and shepherd, would be called Yahshua, which means Yahweh is salvation, Son of the Everlasting. Moses wasn't through with the subtle prophecies. When blessing the people near the end of his life, he addressed the tribe of Judah.
Hear, Yahweh, the voice of Judah, and bring him to his people. Let his hands be sufficient for him, and may you be a help against his enemies. Deuteronomy 33:7.
Messiah's established lineage from the house of Judah, see Genesis 49:10 for that, is in view here. Moses was imploring Yahweh to bring the Messiah to his people. Messiah was expected to come from Judah's royal line, the family of David.
Yahweh tells you that he will make you, that would be David, a house, that would be a royal dynasty. When your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever. 2 Samuel 7:11 and 12, also verse 16. See also 1 Chronicles 17, verses 1 through 15.
Thus he was to be both prophet, like Moses, and a king, like David. The length of his reign was unprecedented. It would last forever. He was also to be a priest, but not of the order of Aaron, for that would have required him to be of the tribe of Levi, not Judah. But David wrote of him,
Yahweh has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Psalm 110:4.
This, too, was something unique. No one had ever been a prophet, priest, and king. What would his reign be like? David's dying words were,
When one rules over men in uprightness, when he rules in reverence for God, he is like the light of the morning, like the brightness after rain, that brings the grass from the earth. 2 Samuel 23:3 and 4, NIV.
Would Messiah be any less righteous or upright, any less kind to his people? No, the Jews expected someone just like David had described.